Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. Thanks to Joe for doing all the great work he does. I am real excited about this. This is the difference. And so we're going to say welcome three different people. We're going to welcome Carl Ficks Jr. Nice to see you, Carl.
Nice to see you,
And
Gary.
we also have Melissa Smith. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
And
Thank you.
my friend, and let's be honest, my neighbor is Dr.Lynne Maureen Hurdle. Nice to see you as always. It's nice to see you here instead of in the elevator, but that's another story. But I want to start this. This is a fascinating book, and I'm going to present it in this way. I attended Mayor Adams put together like these community visioning things where it wasn't him. He would send a representative to meet with people, and they didn't talk about issues and they didn't talk about politics. They wanted to find out who people are. And I attended one, and they went around the room, people talking very honestly about their lives. Every single person in that room, Bronx people, had something to say that was dramatic and maybe traumatic about their lives. So one young woman who, goodness gracious, couldn't be more than 25, talked about her fiance who got ill right away and died, and her life has never been the same. Another young man said, my older brother was my idol, and then at some point he got ill and he passed. Another person said, I didn't get into the Bronx High School of Science, and my neighbors criticized me because I ended up going to DeWitt Clinton High School instead, and that was a revelation to me, like, wait a minute, what's wrong with me? Every single person had something. When I read this, I say, wait a minute, every person who wrote an essay here had something that happened to them and they had to find their way. This is the premier self-help book. So Carl, let's just start with you. Who put this together? How'd you find, how did we find the authors? And just let's talk in general about the difference.
Sure. Thank you, Gary. And again, thanks for having us on. This book is the brainchild of Akim Novak. And he had the idea and invited one of his friends and colleagues in South Florida, Rosemary Ravenel, invited her in, and the two decided to co-edit, and each invited a few friends and others that they'd gotten to know over the years. And the prompt was there an event or a series of events that made a difference in your life? That was a seemingly simple prompt, but it really isn't. And they invited us, there are 8 contributing authors, to submit an essay, 3,500 plus or minus words on that prompt. And that's what we did. And Akim and Rosemary, during the process, realized that the essays fell into really 3 buckets: loss, courage, and personal transformation. So that's how they organized the book. And they found that they were so moved by the essays that they decided to contribute their own. And they, in fact, I do not believe that was the plan at the outset, but that's the way it unfolded. So there are 10 essays.
There are 10. It is funny that you say it that way, because in your own, you repeat a few times, I thought this was my saving grace until it wasn't. And that seems to have been the theme going around. So Melissa Smith, let's just talk to you. You are a women's boxing historian, the author of The History of Women's Boxing, the first comprehensive narrative of the sport. The Ring magazine called it the Bible of women's boxing. Well, if you've done all that, what's the problem?
Well, I had a lifelong love affair with boxing, but it took me a very long time to realize that I could actually do it myself. But really what it became was a means to have the cathartic experience of undoing all of the damages in my life, the pains that I'd suffered, the traumatic experiences. And it became more a battle with my own self, my own conscious being. And every time I'd hit the bag, as I really started to pummel it, tears would come streaming down my face, because I realized that I was undoing decades, really what amounted to be decades of pain and unresolved issues that had plagued me since childhood.
And I thought it was incredibly compelling to read. So here's somebody who's an athlete, who's accomplished, and yet tears were coming down your face while you were doing it. Now, of course, boxing, I guess, physically helps, because it's a physical exertion. If you get mad at something, go punch a wall. Of course, I don't know whose house that is. It could be mine, or it could be Lynn's. Could be both of us. It's yours. Okay.
Brooklyn.
Well, it's not far from the Bronx. And of course, How Boxing Uncaged Me was the title of your essay. So whereas you've had that, do you want to share any of the traumas or things that you have exerted outward? Just one or two.
I had been, sexually assaulted as a teenager. My stepfather sexually abused me as a teenager.
I'm so sorry.
I had, it took me a very long time to get past self-harm. Not so much outwardly. Thankfully, I didn't come into drugs or alcohol, but there are other ways of doing self-harm. And it took me a very long time to become cognizant of that, because I was very good at playing the game of that everything was perfect, but you always pay the price. And it took me until walking into Gleason's gym and really almost in a sense pummeling myself, because each time I hit the bag or I hit the pads or even shadow boxing, it was a way of opening up my own scars, to kind of refresh. And every bit of sweat and tear was a way of releasing.
You had, now we're recording this on Monday, the 11th. On the 10th, you had an event at Gleason's gym.
Yes.
Is it still significant to walk in that room? And
always.
Wow.
It's my home. It's become my home.
It's difficult to hear you even say what happened to you. And I'm sorry to have to repeat that this happens to many people. And they're dragged down by it. But I guess the key then is to find your way through and figure out.
Find your way through. I had even come to the point of wanting to end my own life, but I found, we have a core in us, and it's a matter of accessing it. And I went to therapy. I mean, all the things one tries to do, but it was the physical act of gaining my own power. What I call the ring of power, the extension of your arm.
So How Boxing Uncaged
Me is to make me release into my own life. It helped me to become a writer. Couldn't have written without boxing.
My good friend Dr. Lynne Maureen Hurdle is a communication expert, a conflict resolution strategist. So easy to say, Lynn, if you do conflict resolution, you could figure this stuff out. As you know, I know you and your family so well. I was very struck to read about the death of your mom and how traumatized you are. Even though you know all this conflict resolution stuff, this was hard for you to get through.
Yeah, well, and it was happening at the same time that I was dealing with the fact that I was diagnosed with infertility. And so to be losing my mom at a time when it felt like I was losing a good sense of my womanhood as well was really difficult. And then to be losing my mom at a time when we decided to go through and adopt and start a family that way. And then to lose the dream of having a grandmother to really spoil my children was extremely traumatic for me. It sent me into a long depression. And it really did, though, in terms of coming out, it sent me to a place where I realized there has to be some good in this. Not that my mom has died, but what has that released me from? And it released me from a lot of the cultural rules and norms of how you raise children, and then how you resolve conflicts and talk to my children and other people about conflicts. And
so for you, I mean, you didn't pummel the bag, so to speak, nor did you pummel your neighbors, I'm pleased to say, but you looked within and looked to your family. And of course, I know that, my dear friend, your husband, Warren had passed also another hurdle to overcome, and but it's really looking within yourself, and certainly your sons, I know, have are part of this whole picture as well. Before we run out of time, Carl, I want to talk with you. You are he's a physical specimen, ladies and gentlemen. He runs, he hikes, he does all kinds of things. For you, what is the trauma and what made the difference? By the way, it's The Difference: Essays on Lost Courage and Personal Transformation. That's the book. So, Carl, go ahead. Just give us a little bit of that.
Sure. It was a series of events, Gary. It wasn't one tipping point, and I opened my essay with describing a hike I took a very epic hike I took with one of my brother-in-laws, and he later disappeared in 2014, and that kind of started this series of losses.
And let me just add, that notion leaves an unresolved thing, because he disappeared in one of these things that you were, one of these hikes, etc. That you can't resolve that. I'm sorry, I'm not lecturing you, but that's very difficult.
I agree, and I will tell you this, Gary, that I found that writing this essay, my brother-in-law Paul, who disappeared, never had a funeral and never had an obituary. This piece of the essay to him is my tribute to him, to let the world know about him. It's almost a de facto obituary of him. So it was a series of losses, and I'm careful to note at the outset of my essay the Denison quote, that all sorrows can be borne if you tell a story about them. So that's what I do, but I also make clear that my sorrows are not unique. Everyone experiences them. And the thing that is really gratifying is that people are finding their stories in our stories, in Lynne's story, in Melissa's story, in my story. And the feedback has been phenomenal, because I think what this book does, it gives people hope. And that's a good thing. And, as they say in Shawshank, it's maybe the best of things. And so I simply have taken these losses and I've repackaged and repurposed them. And I'm encouraging folks to keep moving, learning, experimenting, exploring, and living.
That's the thing. And I will tell you, I started, I read them. And I started to say to myself, wow, believe me, like everybody else, I got stuff in here that's not always so pleasant. And I said, wait a minute, maybe I ought to figure it out. I mean, I was almost going to go around and ask everybody to give advice, but everybody has their own drama. And I'll tell you this, because we're going to have to go. If you were to meet any one of these three people in the street, you would say, oh, hi, and they would be nice, normal, whatever you want to call it. But every single person has this. So I want to thank each of you. Carl Ficks Jr., thank you.
Thank you,
Malissa Smith, thank you. Lynne, I'll see you around town. The book is The Difference. Make a difference in your life. Let's find, as Carl just said, let's find a little hope. Find it within us. Find it in the things you do. Find it in the people around you. There's ways of coping. And if you really have a conflict, talk to Lynne, because she can help you with it. Anyway, listen, I love you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for presenting this. And that is how we will conclude the Bronx Buzz for this evening. And so we will tell you, as we always, thanks to Joe Hirsch and to Carl and Melissa and Lynne. And if the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise, I'll see you next week. Good night.